The power of Iraq to inflict harm on all free nations would be multiplied many times over. America could slip into a financial panic, and a distressing scenario would unfold should enemies strike our country. Businesses would close their doors, murderous dictators. The value of your home could plummet, nuclear weapons. More banks could fail, genocide, foreclosures, and global war. The stock market would drop even more. The terrorists could fulfill their stated ambitions and kill thousands or hundreds of thousands. Millions of Americans could lose their jobs.
Are, for all practical purposes, part of movement conservatism. The New York Post, the Washington Times, and in which other news organizations are intimidated, at least to some extent. There's nothing like Fox News and on other TV networks. You can look at, there's no liberal equivalent to Fox News. If Bush said that the Earth was flat, the headlines would read, "Opinions differ on shape of the planet."
As the crisis worsened, politicians finally woke up to realize that the economy they had deregulated was imploding. Congress was finally being asked to act. Ironically, the pitch was made by a Republican, Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson, a former CEO of Goldman Sachs, in the years that firm made massive profits in housing, securitization, and speculation.
We must do so in order to avoid a continuing series of financial institution failures and frozen credit markets that threaten American families' financial well-being, the viability of businesses both small and large, and the very health of our economy.
The question, would government intervention fix the problem or make it worse? Would it reward the companies that profited from massive fraud, or would it lead to more fraud? Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson and Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke began a push for what might be called the final plunder.
Rule 1. Rush the decision. Time the game to fall in the week before Congress is set to adjourn and just 6 weeks before an historic election, so your opponents will be preoccupied, pressured, distracted, and in a hurry.
The real story was not widely known, except through one interview on C-SPAN.
Look, I was there when the Secretary and the Chairman of the Federal Reserve came those days and talked with members of Congress about what was going on. On Thursday at about 11 o'clock in the morning, the Federal Reserve noticed a tremendous drawdown of money market accounts in the United States to the tune of $550 billion. We were having an electronic run on the banks. Their estimation was that by 2 o'clock that afternoon, $5.5 trillion would have been drawn out of the money market system of the United States, would have collapsed the entire economy of the United States, and within 24 hours, the world economy.
A shell-shocked Congress was given a 3-page plan. In essence, it gave Paulson total control to spend $700 billion. Some saw it as a power grab. Others saw the deliberate creation of a crisis to push through a corporate agenda.
2. Disarm the public through fear. Warn that the entire global financial system will collapse and the world will fall into another Great Depression.
In June 2009, President Obama announced new financial reforms, saying the crisis was caused by mistakes. In June 2009, President Obama announced new financial reforms, saying the crisis was caused by mistakes. By not recognizing the government's inability to police Wall Street, investor Jim Chano says his reforms are doomed to fail.
And it's a little bit tough because the guys who are the bad guys are one step ahead of the cops on the beat every single time.
For starters, we need a full investigation, like the one that followed the great crash of 1929. We need to know who benefited from one of the most insidious crimes in history. How did Wall Street's wizards engineer this disaster, and who is complicit with them? Will the big fish ever be prosecuted. Will the media cover these issues? Up to shift the debate to include the need for deeper change and a crackdown on white-collar crime. Up to shift the debate to include the need for deeper change and a crackdown on white-collar crime. Will the media cover these issues?
Everybody that comes on television is working for government or working for Wall Street. They all have a vested interest.
With a call to investigate the wrongdoers, the crimes behind the crisis.
We need a jailhouse, not just a bailout.
Channel claiming that its main competitor, CNBC, owned no less than by General Electric, was anti-business. Fox News hyped its new kissing cousin to the skies.
I can guarantee you that.
Look, we have a situation now in which there are several major parts of the news media that are, for all practical purposes, part of movement conservatism. The New York Post, the Washington Times, and in which other news organizations are intimidated, at least to some extent. There's nothing like Fox News and on other TV networks. You can look at, there's no liberal equivalent to Fox News. If Bush said that the Earth was flat, the headlines would read, "Opinions differ on shape of the planet."
The government and the Federal Reserve Bank cutting interest rates, the housing market exploded, and America found itself a new bubble. Naysayers were dismissed.
I didn't see how this thing could have gone on for another decade. It seemed like the problem was so enormous, that the real estate bubble was so huge, that the bad debts that had been accumulated by our financial institutions was just so enormous. I didn't see any way that we could sweep it under the rug much longer. And so, even the fact that we made it to 2007, was an accomplishment.
August 2007 marked the beginning of the end of an era. What had gone up was now coming down. Foreclosures were up 93% from the year before. In London, there was a run on Northern Rock Bank. More bank write-downs followed. Billions at UBS and Citigroup. Fannie Mae, the largest source for home loans, reported a $3.55 billion loss for the fourth quarter. In March 2008, the fifth largest investment bank in the world, Bear Stearns, was on the verge of collapse. Many of the nation's most respected financial journalists were still getting it wrong.
Get my money out of there. No. Bear Stearns is fine. Do not take your money out. This is real. If there's one takeaway other than a plus 400 somewhere, Bear Stearns is not in trouble. I mean, if anything, they're more likely to be taken over. Don't move your money from Bear. That's just being silly. Don't be silly.
The media was complicit, says Dean Starkman, a financial journalist now with the Columbia Journalism Review.
The business press, former colleagues of mine, friends of mine, did not really recognize and understand what they were up against, how dramatically the world had changed, the lending industry had changed, things that you've kind of documented, how out of control Wall Street had become. And I think it's a real contributing factor to how we got to where we are today.
Starkman even compares the journalists who cover Wall Street to reporters sent to Iraq. He said they too were embedded, but in the corporate culture.
The Great Panic of 2008 is the equivalent for the business media what the Iraq War was for the Washington Press Corps. This is the financial story of the last 70 years. So the parallel is fair. You could further extend the analogy a little bit to think about the idea, this concept of being embedded. In the Iraq situation, of course, reporters were literally embedded with the troops. In the financial situation, I think you could begin to make the case that the press corps itself was sort of embedded within a particular narrative that has its origins on Wall Street. I don't think that analogy is out of whack at all.
Business channels compete for viewers. With the Fox Business 2009, President Obama announced new financial reforms, saying the crisis was caused by mistakes. By not recognizing the government's inability to police Wall Street, investor Jim Chano says his reforms are doomed to fail.
Save our hope. Save our
says new regulations will help, but the media too has to wake up, to shift the debate, to include the need for deeper change and a crackdown on white-collar crime. It became clear that the structure of our economy has yet to be transformed.
Drug Alpha dispersed circuits. Any way to do
In June 2009, President Obama announced new financial reforms, saying the crisis was caused by mistakes. By not recognizing the government's inability to police Wall Street, investor Jim Chano says his reforms are doomed to fail.